Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight for our keynote address here as part of our Alma College Presidential Speaker Series. It has been an absolute joy to spend time with our speaker here today and to have him interact with some of our students, staff, and faculty on campus. To hear not only the good work he's been doing, but to inspire, hopefully, our group of students here to act, to respond, and to feel that sense of responsibility to our neighbors, and certainly to develop that community that we say we're so proud of here at Alma. My name is Dr. Andrew Connerville, and I am the director of the Center for College and Community Engagement. And as the director of the 3CE, I am delighted that we offer these types of experiences for our students, staff, faculty, and our community members who are here in person, and certainly all of those who are joining online on the YouTube channel. This will be recorded and will be up on our Alma College YouTube channel in addition to the Presidential Speaker Series page if you'd like to see this and previous speakers that we have brought to Alma College. Tonight, though, we have the honor of welcoming David Hogg. David, 23 years old, rose to prominence during the 2018 United States gun violence protests as a student survivor of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida. He co-founded March for Our Lives, a student-led demonstration that's considered to be the biggest youth-led protest since the Vietnam War era. With his younger sister, Lauren Hogg, also a student at Stoneman Douglas, David co-wrote Never Again, a New York Times bestseller. The Hoggs also contributed to the best-selling book Glimmer of Hope, How Tragedy Sparked the Movement, a compilation of writing from the founders of March for Our Lives. David is a prolific voice on social media. I encourage you certainly to take a look at his active presence there and to follow his continued advocacy and work in our nation for peace, and certainly for youth advocacy and for us as students, staff, and faculty in places of higher learning to use the abilities that we have to think critically and to serve generously and to truly be the next generation that will right the wrongs that have gone before us. Hogg uses his platform to promote civic engagement, activism, and voting. I am delighted to welcome then tonight David Hogg.
Well, thank you until this week, fun fact, I had really never been to Michigan before. And it's been lovely. This is my second time in Michigan in the past 7 days. I was just in Lansing last week helping rally young people to turn out and vote. So thank you for being such a welcoming state and lovely people. And also just, it's beautiful here. Thank you. So to begin with, I want you to think about somebody that you love. I want you to picture them now. It could be your child, your grandchild, your mom, your dad, your partner, your spouse, your sibling, your best friend. And I want you to ask yourself, where do they attend school? Or go to work? Or where do they go to church? What's their name? What's the last thing that you said to them? Are there any family traditions, vacations, or life milestones that make you smile? Pick just one person, and maybe they came with you here today. And I want you to say your name, just like this. So I'll say it on the count of 3 for me. 1, 2, 3, Lauren, who's my sister. So now you can do it. 1, 2, 3, Lauren. Now imagine your friend, the person that you just named, is at a shopping center grabbing some lunch. It's the middle of the day, and a notification pops up on your phone that says shooting, with the name of the city where your loved one lives. You text, and there's no response. And you call, and there's no answer. And you repeat this 50 times. Could you imagine seeing their name on the list of a growing list of the victims of gun violence? Unfortunately, many of us, and many that are here, don't have to imagine that. Since the shooting in Parkland, Florida, at my high school, that list has grown by 200,000 people, just like your loved one. There are too many people that have lived this gut-wrenching reality every single day. I'm here because I don't want anybody else to live this nightmare. No matter your politics, left or right, no one should. I'm here because, like you, I love this country. And for it to function, we need to understand that rights are power, and with power comes responsibility. All Americans have a right to not be shot. All Americans have a right to safety and domestic tranquility. The right to guns does not come before our right to live, because death is the ultimate infringement upon not just our Second Amendment rights, but all of our rights. Nowhere, not anywhere in the Constitution, is unrestricted access to weapons of war like the AR-15 used to slaughter my classmates and teachers a guaranteed right. We've seen the damage that AR-15s can do, not just at my high school and far too many others, but when we look at the innocent children of Uvalde. Tiny coffins should horrify us. Tiny coffins filled with small, mutilated bodies. Those kids are our future. That should fill us with rage. It should fill us with demands for a change and not endless debate like we've seen for my entire lifetime. I was born a year after Columbine. Do we want to have another generation of young people speaking at colleges like this in the future, or do we want to end this now? We need change now, and not in this debate. We know what we disagree on. It's obvious. Watch the news. Plenty of us know this, especially here in Michigan, like Florida, a very purple place. We have family members that don't agree with us oftentimes. I grew up in a household that was divided between a father who was in law enforcement and was a registered Republican, and a mom who was a union Democrat teacher. With most of my extended family members being military or veterans, law enforcement, gun owners, and quite conservative, to the point that they thought that the Tea Party was too liberal for them. As you can imagine, Thanksgiving was interesting. But again, it brings me back to this question, right? We must demand change. Not now, not tomorrow, not the next day, or the next election, but now. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that? Yes. Do you agree with that? Yes. Because you're going to have to be a hell of a lot louder than that for people in Lansing, where this change is necessary, to hear you. Do you agree with that? Yes. If our government can't do anything to stop the 19 kids that were slaughtered in Uvalde and decapitated it's time to change who is in government. I need every single one of you that said yes, not only to register to vote, especially the young people, but to go out and vote in every single election. Because this change is not going to come in one election, but it does come. As we gather here today, and unfortunately, as we recently saw just a few hours ago on the news, we know every single day that multiple next shooters are plotting their attack. Well, the federal government pretends, and state governments often pretend that there's nothing that they can do to stop it. That's bullshit. It's BS. No matter if you're a gun owner or not, liberal or conservative, young or old, we all agree, we must stop this. No matter how much longer we're going to debate this, we all know we have disagreements, as I've said, and to debate this over and over again for decades is just going to perpetuate this issue. My generation is paying the price for that debate. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for young people in the United States. Even more than car crashes now. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for our future in this country. We need to end this debate and act now, even if it's a small law that stops just one Parkland, or one Uvalde, or one San Bernardino, or one Sandy Hook, or one Las Vegas, or any number of other countless shootings are happening. All of us agree, every responsible gun owner, every liberal conservative, no Americans want their kids or themselves to be endangered inside or outside of their schools. In 2018, in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting, people said, it's great that these kids care, but this is Florida. You can't change it. You guys have probably heard similar things here, right? Trust me, you can't change it. You know, and they said if you can't, and if you might, even if you do change it in Tallahassee, Florida, you're definitely not going to change it in Washington. You're just a bunch of kids. This time is not going to be different. And then they said, watch us. They said that kids don't care about politics. So a month after the shooting, millions of kids walked out of their high schools to demand gun safety and registered to vote in record numbers. They said that you can't change Tallahassee. So we got several hundred students on buses to drive over 6 hours up to our state capitol to demand an end to gun violence. Not as a bunch of Democrats or liberals or Republicans or conservatives, but as a bunch of children who had just gone through a school shooting. Almost all of us were under the age of 18. So we went up to Tallahassee, and as I said, our deeply Republican state legislature raised the age to buy a gun to 21. We passed a law that disarmed people like the shooter at my high school who threatened to shoot it up multiple times. Now that law has been used nearly 6,000 times to disarm people deemed a danger to themselves or others, with a right to due process and a right to counsel. In the time since Parkland, we passed over 170 state gun safety laws since our first march. They said that young people don't vote. So we went out and registered nearly 100,000 young people to vote across the country, and millions more inspired by our marches that then helped lead to one of the highest youth voter turnouts ever in a non-presidential midterm in 2018. And from that, because we turned out and we went to several dozen states across the country, unfortunately Michigan was not one of them. We were trying to get to a lot of states, sorry. And we had to factor in summer break because we were students about to go to college or go back to high school. Because of that, we voted out more NRA-backed politicians through the power of the youth vote than ever before in American history at the legislature. They said that you can't change Washington, D.C. So then we got nearly 1 million people to march with us in D.C. and 800 marches around the world to help turn out young people to vote and demand action on this. From that, as I said, we voted out more NRA-backed politicians than ever before in U.S. history and elected a pro-gun safety majority to the House that helped pass a number of gun safety bills. But then it wasn't enough because we still didn't have the Senate. Then, in 2020, let me tell you a story about one thing that happened in 2018, about the power that I know that young people have. I got a call from the White House shortly after the shooting in 2018 from somebody that said, hi, would you like to come to Donald Trump's listening session to talk about gun violence? And I said, absolutely not. There is no listening that needs to be done here. The listening that needs to be done is you listening to what the young people are demanding. The millions of school children walking out of their schools to demand that they simply don't be shot while they are studying for their next exam and trying to be a student. The thing that you need to listen to are the students that are demanding not just to be safe in their schools, but also safe in their communities on a daily basis. The communities that are Black and brown and most affected by gun violence are at the center of this movement. The people you need to listen to are the young people that are saying, we aren't Democrats, we aren't Republicans, we are children, and we are asking you to simply get over your politics and do your damn job. From that, they said, well, it's okay, because young people are going to turn on in 2020. Like, it is what it is. And then guess what? We had the highest ever youth voter turnout in 2020. We kicked out Donald Trump from the White House, one of the most NRA-backed politicians in American history, who got $30 million from the NRA, and we got the Senate because young people in Georgia, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in states across the country turned out to vote not just for Democrats or Republicans, but more than anything, for morally just leaders that protect us and protect our union. And know that creating a more perfect union is about being more than red or blue. It is about being red, white, and blue, because that is what the United States is, by working together to make our kids safer, which is what all of us agree on. So from the power of that youth vote, and people of all ages voting as well, thank you, we turned out and we defeated more NRA-backed politicians again than ever before in American history, including the president, who had some of the most support ever in American history. And we went in just 4 years from hanging up on the White House to meeting in the West Wing with the White House and passing the first comprehensive gun safety bill in 30 years. And now I have even better news. We aren't just acting on the outside. They said, well, it's great that you guys are a bunch of kids and you've made some action, and then you can pressure people on the outside. But, Congress isn't going to change from the inside. I said, okay, bet. So, starting this time last year, I got a call from about 3 years ago, actually. I was in Las Vegas on the anniversary of the Route 91 shooting, where that was one of the largest mass shootings in American history, if you all remember that. And we were having a presidential forum with all the presidential candidates, and one certain one, who's a Republican, did not show up, despite being invited, obviously. At that event, a young man named Maxwell Frost came up to me, and he said, I know that you're hiring for the National Organizing Director position right now with March for Our Lives. I worked with you all on your tour in Florida to help turn out young people to vote. I've worked with the ACLU on a number of things. I have experience as an organizer, and I want this job. There's nothing more that I basically wanted in my life than this job, because I care so much about this mission. Maxwell started out organizing against gun violence when he was I think he was just under 14 years old. When it was Christmas, instead of asking for presents, he asked his parents to buy him a plane ticket to go and see the first national vigil on gun violence on the 1-year anniversary of St. Hook. His parents bought it for him, along with him working on a number of odd jobs to save us money to go there. That was the day that Maxwell became a gun violence prevention activist, because he knew that the importance of addressing this issue. That's when he met people from Newtown and started working with the movement, and then that's what transpired into him getting involved in activism. So that day, after a couple more meetings and things and talking with our team, we ended up hiring Maxwell to be our national organizing director. He did a great job, and one of the things that he did while he was national organizing director, actually his first job, I can't believe this story is true, it gives me chills every time I tell it, is we had, Virginia has an off-year election cycle for their state legislature. And we had taken the state house, the state senate, and the governor. And this was our opportunity to work with people like Maury Haas, who had had a child go through the Virginia Tech shooting, and a number of other people, obviously, from that state that had been impacted, working on this for over a decade. This was our chance to pass gun laws after the people had spoken out and changed it. Now, here's the thing about March for Our Lives. We are predominantly a group at the time, and to this day, we're predominantly a group of mostly high schoolers who started walking out of their high schools, and middle schoolers too, actually, and some college students. So the way that we work is we help show up in states like Richmond, or in state capitals like Richmond, to lobby and change those laws. The problem is, our students started getting death threats. Death threats from people like NRA members and others who had showed up and were afraid of us changing the gun laws simply because we wanted to be safer, because the people of Virginia had spoken out and had won. And they were going to turn out in thousands of armed protesters, not all of whom, but many of whom were associated with far-right white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups, armed to intimidate our students who simply wanted to be safe in their communities. And Maxwell said, I don't think I can do this. I don't think that we can make this possible because the reality is here, our students have been in danger. And I said, we have to do this. We cannot let them win because we're students and we can't let the next shooting happen without knowing that we did everything that we could to change these laws. So what we did is we called up the state legislator who had been himself impacted by gun violence when his fiance was on live TV and was shot and killed. And he ran for state legislature and had won. And we called him up and we said, hey, we have a crazy idea. Can we sleep on your floor the night before so we can get up that morning and go out and lobby to change these laws with our students to keep them safe and get a bunch of college students out there to go and organize because a lot of the high school students were understandably afraid. We said yes. So that night, Maxwell went up there to Richmond and stayed on that state Capitol floor and spent the night there, and they got up and passed all of those gun laws. And that was his first interaction with March for Our Lives. A bunch of students did that. A bunch of young people who simply didn't want to die in their high schools, in their communities, were counter-protested by thousands, tens of thousands of armed protesters, including Alex Jones. They did that as students. So don't tell me that young people can't do it. Right? Then, earlier this summer, or last year, Maxwell called me up and he said, David, I think I'm going to lead March because I want to run for Congress. I said, excellent. So Maxwell, at the time, a 24-year-old, he was going to be 25 by the time that he was elected, so he was able to do it. I said, it's going to be a long shot, but even if you just pressure the other candidates, it'll be great. Not thinking he could actually win necessarily. Maxwell ends up running, and I remember this time last year, I started getting on his kitchen cabinet calls every single Thursday morning in my dining hall. Those of you that have been on campaigns before get it. Just talking to him. And when he started out, it was in the midst of COVID. He was basically couch surfing because he had got priced out of his rent had gone up so much that he was basically Uber driving and campaigning at the same time. Because he also couldn't live at his parents' house because his grandma was living there. And obviously with COVID and everything, he couldn't risk endangering her. So Maxwell started out with less than $5,000 in his campaign account and no campaign manager this time last year. And I worked with him in his first quarter to help raise over $250,000 to help give him a shot early on in the race from small dollar donors from around the country. And from that race, just recently, Maxwell's in a very safe Democratic district, it's plus 14 points, so basically the election is the primary. Maxwell was running against as an Uber driver and somebody who worked formerly for the ACLU and March for Our Lives, and would be the first Afro-Cuban person in Congress. It was a long shot. He was running against two former members of Congress, one of whom was a hedge fund manager at the same time he was a member of Congress. Yes, really. Somebody who had committed tax fraud as a member of Congress and a state legislator. So excellent people, just pretty proud. And guess what? Maxwell won, not just by a small amount, but by a landslide, by over 10 points in the primary. He will be the first Gen Z in Congress and the first Afro-Cuban person in Congress. If that doesn't give you hope, I don't know what does. Because I remember after we did that, I got this really strange, bubbly feeling. I was like, what is that? And it was hope. So even when you think it's a long shot, still try. Because you never know. We've also changed culture. Together, you and I, we made progress in Republican states where people told us it was possible. We made the NRA weak, financially weak, and culturally irrelevant. Because they showed their true colors. When members of Congress like Marjorie Taylor Greene follow around 18-year-old school shooting survivors, screaming at them, calling them crisis actors, the biggest change in politics around this issue has come from everyday people like you, because we all have realized that we are not the crazy ones. The crazy ones are the conspiracy theorists who are insane enough to say that these shootings are not real. What has happened to our country? That is, I don't care if you're left or right, that is insane. So, as I said, we're changing Congress from the inside. And on top of that, we've also seen the progress the Biden administration has made on this issue, even despite the challenges in Congress with the filibuster. Just recently, they allocated over $100 million to specifically violence prevention-based programs that are not policing-based to help fund different mental health care programs to help students. And predominantly in the communities most impacted by gun violence that don't need more police but need resources, they allocated $100 million to help support those programs, to help stop those young people from going down the pathway of violence and destruction due to the lack of resources. In less than 5 years, we went from hanging up on the White House and not having the Senate or the White House to then us winning because you voted. That's the difference that happened here. People cared. You voted. We were told that a bunch of naive young people couldn't make change, and then we did, and we're just getting started. People used to say supporting gun safety was the third rail of American politics, and in less than 5 years, we made the NRA the third rail of American politics. The movement to end gun violence is more inclusive, diverse, and representative of the country than ever before, because it has to be. Nobody is safe. This time, responsible gun owners, like my father and many others, are aligned on the basic solutions we need to keep kids from dying. After Uvalde shooting, a majority of Americans say that now stopping the epidemic of gun violence is a top issue for them. That's because this isn't a political issue. It's moral necessity. Not only do people, regardless of political affiliation, agree with their hearts and minds, they're mobilizing alongside us. Every day, more Republicans and gun owners join the movement for gun safety because they understand gun safety is not a political issue. It is a moral issue we must unite as Americans to promote. Because while we understand we have disagreements, we know nothing is more important than the ones that we love. While we may not agree on everything, we do agree that we must act to end gun violence. And we work with the understanding that disagreement and hatred are not the same thing. As I said, I grew up in a very politically divided household. My family being a lot of conservative gun owners. My first experience with guns, I know there may be some of you that think, oh, this is just some liberal hippie-dippy, whatever. You would not have Thanksgiving in my house. I can't believe that enough. My first experience around guns was as early as I can remember in second grade. When the only time for my father was enough guy to be home early before school, and so maybe some of you who have family members in law enforcement can relate to this. The only time he would be home before me was when he would have to go and shoot for qualifications to prove that he could shoot straight. To this day, I can remember the smell of the gun oil that he used to clean his assault rifles and his handguns. All of which I knew how to disassemble, reassemble, shoot, and clean before I graduated elementary school. So don't go on and on about how I'm such a liberal that has never touched a gun in my life. You don't know my family. And here's the thing. Even with the family members that don't agree with me, and as politically divided as our household and family can be, I know from the conversations that I've had with them and many people that I've had around the country with people who don't agree with me, people like even former Congressman Joe Walsh, that it is possible to disagree on some things and agree on others and make progress on it. Because we all agree that we can't, we can respect the fact that we don't agree with each other, but we can't accept the fact that there's nothing that we can do to save our kids. Because like my family, we're all here because we care. We care about each other. We care about the lives being stolen from us. We care about being here to make change. When we march, we make change. I hear over and over again, David, these laws don't work. Criminals don't obey laws. They're criminals. You know that? Why have laws in the first place by now? Why have a government? Let me tell you a story about why I know that these laws work. After the Parkland shooting, Governor Rick Scott signed into law a 3-day waiting period for purchasing a gun and raised the age to buy a gun from 18 to 21. And along with that, he also signed into a law something that would have enabled us to help act against the shooter at our high school who made multiple threats against our school multiple times. And I want to put one important note on that too before I continue the story. The shooter obviously somebody who commits an act of violence like the shooter at my high school is not mentally well. But I also need you to understand what the media often leaves out of the conversations when they talk about these mass shootings is how many of them are white supremacists. The shooter at my high school had a history of drawing swastikas on a number of things. He had a history of making hateful comments against black students, and he had a history of overall hateful, xenophobic, and Islamophobic comments. I think it's important to note that while somebody like that is clearly not mentally ill, that racism is not a mental illness. And we should not be using mental health as a scapegoat to avoid talking about white supremacy in our country. That is a major factor in what enables gun violence, along with patriarchy. Let's not mistake the fact that 90% of these mass shooters are men. Racism is not a mental illness. We did not call the hijackers on 9/11 mentally ill. We called them terrorists. If you're committing an act of politically motivated violence against people like happened in Buffalo just this summer, obviously you may not be mentally well, but first and foremost, you're a terrorist. I want to make that fundamentally clear. Getting back to my story, after Parkland, we passed, one of the laws that we helped pass was a law that enables you to disarm somebody who's a threat to themselves or others. It's called a red flag law or an extremist protection order, more directly. And my mother got a death threat from an NRA member that said, F with the NRA and you will be DOA. I'm not kidding. And this is one of at least several hundred, if not several thousand, that I got over the years. My mother used that red flag law that we created to disarm that individual who lived 20 minutes away from us and had several guns and several hundred rounds of ammunition. The law that we created may have very well helped me from not having to bury my own mother. So don't tell me that these laws don't work. As part of the movement, we see that real tangible progress is not the real tangible progress that we've been seeing, like what happened this summer at the federal level and at the state level, is not an anomaly but an opening. People say again like that these laws don't work. But what's funny is that there's a strong recent public health example as well that lays out exactly what we need to do to prevent gun violence. Just take a look at the tobacco industry. We need to treat guns the way that we treated cigarettes 30 years ago. With cigarettes, we address why our culture glamorizes them and smoking in the first place, why cigarettes are so easy to access, especially for poor kids and kids of color. And we stamped out the corruption, misinformation, and lies of big tobacco, and we need to do the same thing with the gun lobby. We must ask ourselves, why are people so attracted to guns in the first place? Why does our society glamorize these things that are tools that are not cool but are tools? Why is it that somebody like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert thinks that it's okay for her kid, that she claims to be a responsible gun owner, yet she sends Christmas cards with her kids wielding AR-15s? I don't know a single gun owner that is truly responsible that takes out their guns other than when it is completely necessary, either for hunting, cleaning, or going to the range. Because taking them out any more than is totally necessary is a ridiculously unnecessary risk to everyone that you love. Because these are not props, these are not toys, these are deadly tools that are made to kill. And even if you think that they're unloaded, guess what? There could still be a round in the chamber. There's no reason people like Lauren Boebert or any gun owner needs to take that kind of risk with her family. I don't think that she can call herself a responsible gun owner. Because I grew up around responsible gun owners, that is not what it looks like. We have to hold people like Lauren Boebert, and more specifically, the gun industry, the same standard that we hold the tobacco industry. This summer, the Uvalde families asked me and several Parkland students to go and visit them and talk to them about March for Our Lives. And we brought our team and a former classmate of mine, Stan Fuentes, who nearly died in the shooting, and still to this day has pieces of shrapnel in her. And we marched with them around Uvalde demanding accountability for the cops who did absolutely nothing like the cop at my high school. You can say that we need more cops all that you want. The reality is there was a cop at my high school who didn't prove to be a good guy with a gun, he proved to be a coward with a gun. And if we're only using first responders, if first responders are our first reserve to solving gun violence, we're failing them, we're failing our teachers, and we're endangering our students. Because it's like, why would we build, instead of building more fireproof buildings and stopping fires from happening in the first place that burn down buildings, let's just hire more firemen. Why? That's ridiculous. Why don't we actually address the fact of why these things are happening? If we're trying to stop these shooters the second they get on campus, we are failing our children because there's still going to be kids that die, kids that could be like yours. That's not okay. So first responders like my father have to be the last resort and not the first to addressing gun violence. Because by the time a shooter gets on campus, it is far too late. One of the young people I met in Uvalde was 17-year-old Jasmine Foster, who lost her 9-year-old little sister Jackie in the shooting. What struck me was how Jasmine was 17 years old and doing this because I was 17 years old when I started. In some ways, it broke me to see somebody of my own age being forced into activism because they felt like they had no other choice. Jasmine told us what's most hard for her are the small rituals that she doesn't have anymore, like getting Jackie her favorite frappuccino at Starbucks, or how much more quiet her house is now. We fight to stop what happened to Jackie from ever happening again. And additionally, to see the disparity in the response that Uvalde had in comparison to Parkland, predominantly white community, angers me to this day. Because it shouldn't matter if the community is mostly black or brown, or what their citizenship status is. Every community that goes through gun violence should have the same response that Parkland had, of an overwhelming amount of resources pouring out to them. Because all communities deserve to have that kind of support, regardless of how much money they have, or what color they are, or what their citizenship status is. All communities deserve that kind of support. We have to address the fact that the communities most impacted by gun deaths are the ones with the least resources. The ones in black and brown communities that were redlined by the federal government. And the communities that have, especially in rural America, that face an epidemic of gun suicide, that make up 2/3 of gun deaths, that are in part caused by the economic stagnation and lack of investment that has happened, unfortunately. We can't just address what is happening in our cities without addressing what is happening in our rural communities. We must address both, no matter where it is happening, because suffering is suffering, and no American should need to suffer, regardless of whether or not they're white, black, brown, documented, or undocumented. The reason why Parkland doesn't have shootings on a daily basis isn't because we necessarily have stronger laws or more cops than much of Miami-Dade County, where shootings happen daily. It's because Parkland has resources and opportunity. The average income in Parkland is over $110,000 per household. Kids have after-school programs. Most kids, or at least a majority of them, have some money to go to college. Their parents have a stable job. We need to address why somebody picks up a gun, and how they get that gun in the first place. We can't just address the laws, we have to address the culture. That means addressing systemic inequality that our country faces that is completely antithetical to equality and justice for all. Because increasingly our country has inequality and injustice for the many and privilege for the lucky few. A reality that is not unchangeable, but is completely antithetical to the American dream and must be changed. Sorry, it gets overwhelming at times. I think it's important to note that other countries have mentally ill people. They don't have near as much gun violence as we do. Other countries have hateful white supremacist groups. They don't have near as much gun violence as we do. And it's because in those countries, they have the opportunity, they focus on addressing the gun and not the people. Because here's the deal, the shooter at my high school had gone to multiple psychiatrists and psychologists. If somebody's going to do something bad like that, they're going to do that regardless of what therapist they have in the first place. And only stigmatizing gun violence more, or stigmatizing mental health more, by talking about it, well, David, it's really a mental health problem. Yes, it is a mental health problem, but for the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides, the most likely reason why any of you or somebody you know in this room would die from a gun death is gun suicide. By far. In fact, raise your hand if you know somebody who's died from gun suicide. Exactly. This issue continues to touch people across our country, and we do need to fund mental health care more, especially in our rural communities where there is a massive epidemic of gun suicide. But we also can't use mental health as a scapegoat to avoid talking about white supremacy, because there needs to be a conversation about mental health, but it needs to be about the fact that we have an epidemic of depression and anxiety in our young people, in our schools, especially brought on by the fact that they literally feel like they're possibly going into a slaughterhouse every time they go to school. And we need to address the fact that predominantly black and brown communities that experience daily gun violence have enormous amounts of trauma and PTSD from walking past different crime scenes every day where gun violence occurs the most. We have to address all these different forms and not see them as mutually exclusive. And I think it's important to note, just 2 weeks ago, we hear this argument from Henry all the time that, guys, it's really mental health. It's not the guns. It's the people. It's mental health. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, over 100 NRA-backed members of Congress voted against a major bill to fund mental health care in our schools. Doesn't seem like it's actually the mental health care to me. It seems to me like they just want to continue selling guns. And that's wrong. They were presented the opportunity to do the right thing, and they chose not to. You, this November, will be provided the opportunity to choose whether or not you keep those people in power or not, and I hope you do. They say that we need more good guys with guns to stop this. Like I said, there was a good guy with a gun in my high school, only proved to be a coward with a gun. Same thing with the 19 armored and heavily trained cops outside the school in Uvalde. Right now, in fact, Brad Cross, who's one of the parents from Uvalde, has spent almost a week sleeping outside of the school district demanding accountability for the murder of his son, Uzi. Parents like that should be enraging to us and motivate every single parent in America to vote. Because as important as young people voting is, we need older people to also step up and vote with us. It can't just be us, because we have a smaller population than the older population, frankly. There's a lot more boomers than there are of us. We can't just listen to people say, it's great that the kids are here to save us. We need you to help save us by voting. And telling your elected officials that, yes, I'm a Social Security voter, but I'm also a gun safety voter. Because I don't want my Social Security being taken away. I don't want my right to have an abortion taken away. And I certainly don't want my kids being murdered in their schools. The common argument for not making these basic steps is that criminals don't obey laws. No doubt. As I said, criminals don't obey laws by definition. And look, no law is perfect. The shooter at my high school, but here's the thing. The shooter at my high school was not a criminal mastermind. He was a 19-year-old white supremacist who was able to legally obtain his AR-15. The same thing with the 18-year-old shooter in Buffalo, Texas. And the same thing that has happened time and time over and over again. No law is perfect, but these laws do work. Even if we prevent a single mass shooting, it is worth it, because those victims could be your best friend or kid that you mentioned. Let's raise the age at a minimum to buy a gun. There's no reason why you should be able to buy an assault rifle in this country if you can buy a beer. That's ridiculous. The time for these petty arguments is up. Over the years, I've encountered my fair share of people who disagree with me. Some of them went so far as to deny me my own lived reality as a school shooting survivor and called me a crisis actor. I truly believe this time, especially after this summer, is different. Because some of these very same people this summer, for the first time in my life, started to message me online and said, David, I'm sorry. I called you a crisis actor in 2018, and I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. I shouldn't have said those things. And I said, thank you. And now they're part of the group. We have to build an inclusive movement built on forgiveness, because we can't let anything delay us in our protection of our kids and their future, not just in their schools, but in their communities on a daily basis. And the reason why those people came to me is because they woke up to the blatant truth, which is that guns kill, period. Now, I'm not demanding the government take your guns away. What I am saying is that I'm either pro-gun or anti-gun. I am pro-peace, which is what we all are. Assault rifles are designed for one purpose, to be a killing machine. Surely we should be taking as many steps as possible to make sure that these deadly weapons are harder to possess, after properly vetting every single person who desires to own them. In fact, here's I wouldn't call it a fun fact, but an interesting fact. It is legal for you to go out and purchase a fully automatic machine gun right now. But the thing is, there is a heavily vetted process around that, where you essentially need to do a number of steps to make sure that you are not going to be a bad guy with a gun. And there's a reason why we aren't seeing these school shootings committed with fully automatic machine guns. It's because we have a strong process around regulating those damn guns in the first place. Pardon our French. We made this time different over the summer because we see it a bit more clearly. Our enemy is not the people on the left or the right. Our common enemy is gun violence. And as I said, I can respect people who don't agree with me all the time. But what I can't accept is the notion that there is nothing that we can do to save our kids and our country. This summer when I was in Pennsylvania protesting outside of Senator Pat Toomey's office demanding the passage of a gun safety law, dozens of teachers and everyday people, I met a 10-year-old named Emma who was protesting with her mom and her dad who just got out of work as a mailman. He was still in his uniform. And I asked Emily what she wanted to be when she grows up. And she said that she wanted to be a coder. And you know what Senator Toomey did? He refused to meet with her or any of his other constituents outside of there. Simply want to have their kids be safe in schools and communities on a daily basis. Refused. And it's not like he has an election to worry about. He's retiring. He refused. And then he actually walked out after the protest with his head down so that nobody could see him in shame. And he should be ashamed. Because his legacy is not going to be whatever he did in the Senate, it's going to be what he didn't do. The children dying every day aren't Democrats or Republicans. These are T-ball players. They're honorable students. They're future Alma College students. They're coders. They're people like Emily, people with bright futures and big dreams. Every time one of their lives is taken, someone is motivated to join us in this fight, like Brett. We will work arm in arm with each other, with them, every step of the way. And when we win this fight in the end, the only question we'll have is, why the hell did it take us so long? I want to say, young people did everything right. The people who marched with us 4 years ago are still marching today. And we have done everything asked of us. What I realized in the time since is that the movement is not broken, our government is broken, and it is time to fix it. While we did pass the first federal gun law in 30 years, it was not enough. We, especially here in Michigan, have an enormous opportunity to pass gun safety laws and play a critical role in helping turn out young people of all ages so that we can pass more laws. We must break voting records this November like we did in 2020, and we did in 2018 in the midterms. We will run for office, like Maxwell, to replace the cowards who misrepresent us, because we will, and you can join me in this, vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. And you can say it louder to say, vote them out. Okay, I think they heard us. If they didn't, it won't matter, because we're going to vote them out. Now, can I count on you joining us this November and in every election after? Can I count on you showing up for people like Emily, for people like Jasmine, for people like Jackie, for people like Brett, for people like Maxwell Oliver and Fred Bloomberg and countless millions of others, not just in Washington, D.C., but especially in Lansing? Yeah. Can I count on you getting your friends to vote? Every time that you don't feel hopeful, I want you to think back to your loved one that you named earlier. I want you to think back to the people who we are fighting for. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Because I also want you to remember that America is not as divided as Congress is. Because the lines that have been drawn through gerrymandering have made it so that politicians pick their voters instead of voters picking their politicians. And that change is not going to come from Washington, D.C. That change is going to come from Lansing. I need you to show up every single year in Lansing, especially young people, and I need you to run for state legislature. It is so critical. The most divided people, I have visited almost every state on this journey, talking to people extremely far right that literally counter-protested me and screamed at me and said I was a crisis actor while they were wielding the same gun that murdered 17 of my classmates and teachers. That I got to convince and come over to our side, at least on some of our issues, because they agree that nobody who threatens to shoot up a high school should be able to have an AR-15. I've talked to people on all sides of the political spectrum, and I can tell you the most divided people in our country are 100 senators sitting on Capitol Hill. And it's time to change that. We've been debating these issues for long enough. It's time to stop the debate and start acting. These things are not going to fix themselves. Having spent nearly 4 years studying contemporary American history, I can tell you that great generations don't just happen to meet horrible moments at the perfect time. It's that horrible moments create great generations. Our times now call on us to overcome this challenge and many others, and we will, because we must. With the challenges that we face now, from climate change to mass incarceration to likely being the first generation in American history worse off than our parents, to gun violence, and many more, the issues and challenges that we face are numerous, but so are we, and so is our resolve. I know we will meet these challenges because every single generation of Americans before us has. I don't know when we started acting like people of faith. All they ever did was send their thoughts and prayers. I don't know about what Bible you all read, because I know that Jesus did send his thoughts and prayers, but I also know the Jesus that flipped tables. Anytime We have to get to work this November and show up, not just in Congress, but especially our state legislatures. I cannot iterate that enough. Show up in Lansing. Don't go to DC. Go to Lansing every single year. I don't care what issue it is you care about. It can be abortion. It can be gun violence. It can be climate change. It can be whatever it is. Show up in Lansing. I don't know how many different ways I can say it, how many different times I can say it. Show up in Lansing every year before this community and far too many others across Michigan get added to a growing list that people like myself read off of mass shootings. Because unfortunately, every community is going to be touched by this issue unless we act. This November, we need to show up in those state legislatures because it is the easiest place for us to make change. The people that are there are not seasoned congressmen with millions of dollars. They're soccer moms and dads a lot of the time that aren't seasoned political professionals. That can be pushed by a group of young people demanding and showing up at their office and saying, you need to do something about this. And they can be pushed. But what that requires is doing as Frederick Douglass said, that power concedes nothing without demand. Show up and demand. It's the easiest thing you can do to make change. It's how marijuana was done, and it's how gay marriage was done, and it's how it's going to be done with gun safety as well. I need you to vote in every election and lobby your state legislature every year. And I want you to imagine, especially for the young people out there, I want you to imagine the type of elected official that you want to see. For a second, I want you to imagine what characteristics they have. Do you have it in mind? And now I want you to imagine the type of country that you think that you want to live in, the type of country that you want to be. And now I want you to go out there and be that leader, because this union is not going to perfect itself. It is going to require all of us as individuals, as 300+ million Americans, working on ourselves to be that perfect union that we all know that we could be, but right now we're so far from, because we can't get there. But I need you to be that leader, and I need you to be that leader so that we can create that country, because I know we can. This change is not going to happen overnight, but with community, friendship, and persistence, it will come, but we can't give up. When we met John Lewis after the shooting, he said that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And what I've come to realize is while he was right, he was also wrong. This isn't just a marathon. This is an ultra marathon with a baton pass in between. We need older people in this fight. We need to lean on them for their wisdom and guidance to learn from the past. But we also need young people in this fight for the energy and ferocity and the righteous indignation that we also rightfully feel. Because this fight will take decades, but through an intergenerational coalition, we can succeed and we can win. And I want to ask you, will you join me in that marathon, in that ultra marathon? Will you join me? Yes. Will you join me at your state legislature in that marathon? Yes. Every year? Yes. Will you join me in that marathon when you run for office? You can say yes. Will you help support people who are running for office that do say yes to that? Will you say yes to the people that believe that while America has its flaws, that we can still be a great country? Will you say yes to people who acknowledge our flaws are not things to run from, but things to run to with courage so that we can create a more perfect union? Yes. Then I need you to say yes to more people and show up not just when I'm here, but when I'm not here, because I can't be everywhere, but you can be. So go out there and not just vote, but organize your communities and show up at your state legislatures. Because when we do show up, if we show up every single year, we can make it so that no child of any race in any zip code has to live in danger or fear of gun violence. If every state had the same gun laws that Massachusetts has, we could cut gun deaths in half. That would save 27,000 lives a year. Those laws have been ruled constitutional and effective. And guess what? You can still get a gun in Massachusetts. You can't get an AR-15, but you can still get a gun. Do you guys agree with that? Does that make sense? Great. So let's make Michigan the same way. And then let's go and make Wisconsin. And let's go to every single state that we can. But I need you to understand this change starts with you. Don't wait for some person to show up and inspire you. Be the inspiration that you need to be. As Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see. Because that is the only way change has ever been created. And not just that millions of people all of a sudden decided to show up in Washington, D.C. It's that 25 kids, after a school shooting, one of the largest in American history, came together on a living room floor and said, we are going to change this. You can do that too. There are more than 25 people in this room. What are you going to do to organize that so that this doesn't happen at Alma? Because it is coming to every single community, but we have the power to stop it before it gets there. So remember the person that you love. Remember the person that you named at the beginning of this conversation. And remember that every single time you weren't fighting for yourself, you were fighting for them. You were fighting for people like Emmy, who just want to be coders when they grow up. You're fighting for the next honor roll student. You're fighting for the next Alma alumni. And you're fighting for our future, because ultimately that is all why you're here. It's not just to create a more perfect union for us, it is to create a more perfect union for the future, so that in the future, young people don't have to be out here talking about how do we get our politicians to give a damn about us dying in our schools and communities on a daily basis, because there are so many more important things for us to be focusing on. I firmly believe that every single person in this generation and all generations of Americans are capable of greatness. If we landed a man on the moon with basically the power of a calculator, I think we can stop our kids from getting shot in our schools. I think that we can create a country that we all know is complete with American law. But that thing starts with you. I need to go up and show up out there every single year. So please, take this as inspiration, but don't stop here. And go out there and create that change, because maybe one day, 22-year-olds won't have to be up here speaking to you as activists, and instead can be students, because we have a country that protects our young people. Thank you.
Thank you all. We are so appreciative of David's time. We still have about 15, 20 minutes so we can take some questions. I have some of our AmeriCorps Vista workers who are here manning the sides, holding on to the microphones right here. A couple of things about that though. Don't try to take the microphone if you want to ask a question. Let the Vista hold that microphone for you. I'm going to call on you here, and as always, make sure we are very proud to be Scots. We speak civilly, we think critically, we certainly serve generously, and make sure we are asking questions that continue to motivate us. When Cindy and Katie take the microphones right there, and David, if you don't mind, just send up some names of all the students and staff. If you'd like to ask a question, I encourage you to stand up and head towards one of the aisles, or raise your hand. Heavens, folks, Elizabeth, please start right there, please. And also, if you don't mind introducing yourself, please stand for your question.
Okay. Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm a junior here at the college. Could you talk a bit if you've had any success with partnering with Republican legislature for gun safety?
Just talking about it. Yeah, I mean, we have to work with a lot of Republican state legislatures, because most state legislatures are run by Republicans. So I want you to understand too, I am very principled and opinionated, but it doesn't mean I'm not willing to work with other people. I think there's a big mistake there, right? You can have your principles, but the reality is, in our system of government that we have, it is built to force compromise, which I think in many ways is a good thing, obviously. But here's the reality, right? When you have 100% of the power, you can do 100% what you want. When you have 20% of the power, you can get 20% what you want, right? And when I originally started doing this work, you know, when we came up with when the gun safety bill came up in Florida, I said, this sucks, this bill's terrible, we shouldn't pass it. Because I thought that it didn't do enough, because frankly it didn't. But the reality is it ended up helping me potentially stop me from having to bury my own mother, right? Progress is progress. And we need to get all that we can, even if it just saves one life right now, and then build our power from that. You know, the Supreme Court didn't get taken over overnight by conservatives, frankly. It started out with local school board races. It started out with city councils, and it started out with state legislatures. It was a 50-year chess game. And they frankly hit checkmate, and on January 6th, they tried to flip the board, and they may try to flip it again, but the reality is, it's potential for a new game, and it's needed. So, my main experience is basically being like, look, acknowledging that we have disagreements, but we all agree that we need to stop our kids from dying from gun violence. So let's figure out what the common ground is there. Because there are things that we can do around us that can help reduce gun violence, but there are also funding measures that we can do that are needed, like mental health in schools to help address the anxiety that our students have. But it shouldn't be to get students on a list of potential mass shooters if they say I have depression, which I've interacted with several students who said that has happened from their school counselor, right? So that's my kind of experience, is just show up there and demand that they act too. Shame is a really powerful force, as is your stories. So the most powerful thing that young people have in this fight, in my view, are two things. We don't have billions of dollars, unfortunately. But second to that in politics, the most powerful thing you can have is a good story and time. And we as young people have that powerful political asset on our side in many respects, and maybe not in others. But by getting to work now and making mistakes early on, as young as possible, we can learn to build up our power. And if we just got a couple thousand more young people to turn out in Michigan, if people all ages here to understand the weight of this issue, abortion, and so many others, your state legislature could change, and you could pass basically the first gun law that has been happening decades here. It may stop the next mass shooting or act of gun violence or gun suicide from happening.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Other questions?
Get close. I have a story, if that's okay. About 15 years ago, where I was working, the favorite boss in that office was fired abruptly and left everyone kind of devastated. And I thought, what a terrible thing to do. How disrespectful can you be? He was well liked, he was doing a good job, and yet he lost his job. So I went to the person who fired him. This is so unlike me. And I gave him a good talking to and made him feel ashamed. I said, what you've done is so devastating. I think I understand now why people bring guns to the workplace. His eyes almost popped out of his head. And I think I made an impression on him because we knew we were going through changes, and I made him promise that he would never fire anyone like that again. And he didn't. So I guess I shamed him in some respects, but I also emphasized how important it was to choose our words. If we have to everyone is so divided now, it's important to choose the right words and respect each other. I guess that's my story. I don't really have a question, but everything you were saying brought this back to me and how important it is to just respect each other.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that that respect also means respecting somebody's existence, too. You know, there's a certain level of respect where it's like, yes, you can talk about, to some extent, a lot of this stuff on gun violence, but if you're actively arguing to keep white supremacists armed, I'm not going to talk to you about that. There's no room for debate there whatsoever. I'll go and find somebody else to talk to you about it, but we don't have to convince everybody. You know, one of the benefits of people being generally politically apathetic is that a small group of people can have a big impact. So.
Hi, my name is Brenna. I am a junior. I'm also the president of Active Minds here, which is our mental health activism organization, and a few of us over here in our executive council, and we were just wondering what kinds of things do you think that we could do, what kinds of conversations could we have as an organization to help fuel this conversation and lead to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that you need to talk about, especially in regards to like gun suicide, but also trauma that unfortunately, many young people, even in this room, I know, have been touched by gun violence. Even more recently, I had somebody very close to me, only a couple of days ago, witness the murder of a close friend of his. And he was like, you know, you have experience in this because we've known each other for like 4 years because of trauma and stuff or whatever. It's like, what do I do? And I said, well, have you gone to the campus like mental health stuff? He said, yes. And what they told him was to go and practice mindfulness. Right? So it's not enough just to have mental health care. You need to have quality mental health care. And you need to have culturally competent therapists as well. Because what some white guy like me goes through is going to be very different from the first or second gen immigrant experience, right? It's going to be very different from what somebody who is fearful for their life and they get pulled over the point I'm getting at is you need to be very cognizant of the actual quality of therapists and what you're talking about, and listen to students and what they say, because there's no I've heard multiple stories like that, like happen, and that's a Harvard idea, right? Which we think is amazing and like has like great, these places also have pretty bad mental health care, and it's going to take advocates like you working not just to point out the problems with them, but actually doing the hard part, which is talking about how to get better. So that's what I would say.
We'd like to focus on students if we can, for sure. But over here, front. Please keep. Again, a reminder, David is also a senior at Harvard, so he is going to go back and do homework. And
Yes.
So students, you can do this.
Hi, my name is John Fazioli. I'm a freshman here at Alma, and I don't have a question, more so as an expression of gratitude, is that recently in my senior year, we had a day called off of school because someone threatened to shoot up school. It was someone who was in the trap clubs. That made the threat that much more credible because they had easy access to guns. And like you said, it wasn't a matter of mental health because he was also, still to this day, because he was a few grades below me, he still goes to the school, and he's one of the people that goes on Snapchat frequently and just posts racist, horrible things or gets called out for that all the time. And it really just perpetuates that kind of culture. And I thought that what most people think is that it could never happen to me because the school that I went to is predominantly a pretty well-off area. You wouldn't think that something like that could happen so close to you. And it genuinely scared me for the first time in my life. I thought that if I went into school it was on a Friday, if I went to school on the following Monday, I didn't know if I would come out alive because of the fact that he was there with me and that he got little to no repercussion because the fact that they said, oh, it's just mental health. It's not, they didn't address the fact that he had constantly gotten in trouble before for essentially being a white supremacist. And it really, I just kind of didn't have a place to go to. But then I found, I'd heard your name before back in 2018 when the Parkland shooting first happened. And then I found you on Twitter and I was able to go through your account and just see all these good resources. And it led me to a whole new group of people that, no, it's fine. I've made worse. It led me to this whole new group of people that I could like see and aspire to be like and look for a new sense of you in the world. And I really just want to thank you for that. It was life-changing, frankly.
First of all, thank you for saying that, but I would also say I need all of you to understand that it doesn't matter what I say if you all don't show up. I'm just one person like any single one of you. I'm part of a movement that was really pioneered first and foremost by Black and brown women that have been doing this work for decades and never gotten the credit that they've gotten in the first place. And the only reason why I've been able to do this work as well as I have is because of their mentorship. And what I would say to you is, like, first, thank you for sharing your story, but also your story needs to be heard in the state legislature. Because it's hard, regardless of what party somebody's with, to be like, does any adult in here think that that's okay? No, right? No one. The state legislature needs to hear that and hear every story like that, because what the NRA does, and their strategy and why they call me a crisis actor and stuff like that, is because, here's the thing. Let me just break this down, because I thought about this for the past 5 years. They know that the statistics are not with them. Contrary to popular belief, owning a gun does not make you a member of SEAL Team 6. Hate to break it to you. The odds of who's most likely to die if you own a gun is yourself, because the odds of gun suicide of somebody in your household is 5 times higher even if they are not the owner of that gun, right? Automatically, if somebody breaks in, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to successfully defend yourself, contrary to what the media popularly shows us a lot of the time. The reality is that despite that, the NRA, anytime there's a successful use of a gun in self-defense, it's on Fox News, it's on Breitbart, it's on everything. Because we can all argue statistics all we want, we can't argue that that person doesn't exist. So the NRA uses the same strategy for school shootings. They say, you can't talk about this because you're politicizing this if you want to stop these things from happening ever again. Frankly, they're probably children, that is ridiculous. So what, as the NRA, do you do when all of a sudden the very children who went through that school shooting say this needs to end, and like myself, recorded my own classmates in case we died in our classroom, talking about the enemy, talking about gun control, talking about our experience as young people in this country. You have to convince people, because you can't tell those kids that they're politicizing their own tragedy. You literally have to convince people that those kids don't exist by spreading conspiracy theories about them, that then lead to violent threats that almost get them killed. I've had photos of myself and my friends put up at ranges, photos of us taking when we were 17 or 18 years old, with people shooting their AR-15s at them. I've had photos sent to me of my head being cut off. I got a death threat 2 weeks ago. It's intentional. And I can respect responsible gun owners. I can't respect ridiculous conspiracy theorists who actively obstruct us making progress on this issue because they try to make murky what the actual truth is. Because when truth becomes a matter of opinion, our democracy falls apart. Totalitarians rely on making truth a matter of opinion because truth is the enemy of injustice. And it's entirely reliant on people like you at educational institutions to be on the vanguard of the fight against that totalitarianism, because they're going to come for you the second that your foot stands in the way of accomplishing their mission of a total takeover of our democracy, which is terrifyingly happening. So thank you for your story, and go to the state legislature to show up. Sorry for the long answer, but
We don't have time for a couple more questions to those up at the back.
Hi, I'm Kylie. I'm a sophomore here. I'm also part of Active Minds and YDSA. My question is kind of more asking for advice because someone very close to me in my life, I'll just say he owns 2 handguns, and he's the kind of person, he's very conservative, and he says that, you know, he has them just for like safety and protection reasons and emergencies, but he's also the kind of guy that will just openly carry them into like a Walmart. And that makes me extremely uncomfortable considering I live and went to high school 20 minutes from where the Oxford shooting was at, and I was terrified to go to school for the next few days. So I'm more just concerned about how to bring this up to him because I don't think it's necessary to just be able to carry a, like, you know, just any kind of gun out in public where it's not necessary. So I just don't really know how to handle that.
well, I would say, A, you're not going to convince everybody. But B, what I would say is you have to meet people where they're at. There's no perfect solution for what you're talking about. It's really a case-by-case basis, but I would just say, just ask them questions. So when I talked to a group of armed protesters outside of our event in Dallas, Texas in 2018, they're screaming that I was a crisis actor and stuff like that. And I went out and talked to them and I said, okay, why are you here? And all I did is I just met them where they were at. And this is obviously, I'm saying this was an enormous amount of privilege because like I, as a cishet white guy, can go up and talk to those people and be in a lot less danger than basically anybody else. And the thing is, just by asking them simple questions like, okay, why do you feel the need like to say this? He's like, well, because you're trying to take our guns away. It's like, got it. Haven't heard that one before. I said, well, are you going to kill someone? Are you going to kill yourself or somebody else? No, absolutely not. Okay, great. I'm not trying to take your guns away. And if I was, it would be through a court order and due process, the right to counsel. Because the reality is right now, pal, I don't call him pal, but I said, right now, the reality is, sir, you're holding the same type of gun that was used to murder 17 of my classmates and teachers. Do you think somebody in Texas, like the shooter of my high school, should be able to threaten to kill people with that type of gun as a 19-year-old and be able to continue to legally own it and maintain it? No, of course not. Well, guess what? You agree with this. And well, despite us not agreeing on everything, of course, he's not going to agree to ban the very gun that he's holding. He ended up crying because he realized the people that he's protesting were kids. And what I realized from that is that hatred is a defense mechanism a lot of the time. And it comes from fear. And that fear comes from the unknown. Because people like to think that they know what they know, right? But when you're actively confronted and you're not just a keyboard warrior anymore, but you're confronted by the very person you call a crisis actor or whatever it might be, and you simply meet and you don't attack them, you say, okay, got it. I just believe these things, and I know that we're not going to agree on everything, but we do agree that kids shouldn't be dying in schools and communities on a daily basis. Let's find some common ground there. That's how that progress is made. So that's what I would say is kind of just ask them those questions, but don't attack them and be like, you're terrible, whatever. Just cry. slowly but surely. Also read some Taoist philosophy. Be like the dude in the Big Lebowski.
We have time for another student question right there. And then we'll thank David afterwards. He is with us for a couple more minutes after students or staff, faculty, or some community members want to come up and certainly thank him. I have a chance to ask a quick question one-on-one, but he does have to get back to the plane so he can go be a student.
Very excited to call up studying for midterms. So.
Hi, my name's Claire. I'm a junior here, and I was just wondering how you combat the very real fatigue that activism can sometimes create. I'm very interested in that because it seems like you've been through a lot.
Well, I have a great whiteboard over here in chalkboard that I can show you this all on. But a couple of things. One, I am far from perfect. I can talk about all these things that I want today. Look, I don't even practice them fully myself at times because the emotions that I feel and the rage that I feel are so overwhelming. And being okay with that too, knowing that it's a constant work in progress. I like to think that my main organizing philosophy is the Kingian principles of nonviolence. If you guys have ever studied them, I highly recommend. There are just 6 of them. They're awesome. But I don't even practice them a lot of the time. One of them is attacking sources of evil rather than perpetrators. I can't stand these Republicans, frankly, in the Senate. When you can't meet with an 11-year-old just to talk to them about how to make mistakes in our schools, how do you? It's so frustrating. It's overwhelming. What I'll say is that in my own experience, to give you some background, after the shooting, we just went nonstop throughout 2018. And we went nonstop for another year because I took a gap year. And it started at school. And for the first time, I wasn't constantly on the road, basically, where I was able to avoid the fact that my house got swatted, where I was able to avoid the hundreds, probably thousands of death threats, honestly, I lost count, that I got to my house. And for once, I was in a stable place, and I felt terrified because I felt like I was in danger. Not because of anything that the school wasn't doing or anything like that, but because there are so many people out there that had said that they wanted to kill me. And frankly, as an 18-year-old, that's a lot. Also, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I don't care what you think of what a teenager says. Threatening to kill them is absurd. Anyways, I don't care if you're on the left or right, that is ridiculous. And I hope that our generation can do that. So the point I'm getting at is I ran into a brick wall. Because I would always hear after at events like this, oh, I hope you're taking care of yourself, whatever. I was like, thank you. I have no idea what that means as an 18-year-old. I don't. And what I realized is I let the shooting also kill the things that I love. And that was one of the most heartbreaking things, was the guilt that I felt being happy. After the shooting, my friends and I literally would say we can't smile when we're at events and stuff, because people would take conservative adults predominantly. I don't mean to be so polarizing, but that's just a fact. That's predominantly what they were. Would take photos of us and make memes of them and say, spot the face you make when all of your friends have been killed in a school shooting. They tried not only to deny us our own survivorhood, their own happiness. And one of the hardest things was learning how to be happy and not feel guilty about it. And when I started at school, I actually was doing a bunch of speaking stuff like this at the time, and I had to cancel all of it because I got so overwhelmed with PTSD. And it wasn't just from the shooting. I talked so much about the shooting after everything happened that most of my PTSD at the time was coming from the work after. The times where people tried to run me off the road. The times where my house got swatted, and thankfully my family wasn't home, but I'm looking at CNN and my house is being broadcast to the entire country. So now I'm going to get even more threats. And I'm watching that from DC as my family is mortified. And thinking about the cost that I've implicated on my own family as a result of this work, the sacrifices I've made with it. And just the general exhaustion of feeling the pressure because we felt like we were a bunch of kids and we were told, you guys are going to solve this issue. It's really on me. Thank God the kids are here to save us. Frankly, shame on the adults that said that to us. We need to all be in this together. And what it took for me was I literally started journaling every single day because I felt so, it's like when you work out a lot or like you just do something a lot, you get calluses on your hands like I have now. You become numb when you're experiencing so much trauma, at least I did. And I couldn't feel anything. I didn't feel sad, I didn't feel happy, I felt numb. Because for 2 years straight almost, I went and I talked to people every day that had lost their child to gun violence, that had lost their best friend to gun violence, that had lost a loved one every single day to gun violence over and over again for 18 hours a day straight for months at a time. And what it took for me was journaling every day to figure out how to be a human being again, basically, and not an activist. And it took learning how to say no through hiring people like Maxwell and feeling comfortable enough to do that, to step back, because I had to realize that I was treated like a sprint and not a marathon, like John Lewis said. And I had worked out very hard. My PTSD got so bad, I was getting 2 hours of sleep a night. It was like all the flashbacks I had, and I was sick constantly as well. It was truly one of the worst experiences, second only to a shooting in my life. And what it took for me was realizing that, A, you can't feel guilty about having fun. The need for a movement to succeed and the pressure for it to succeed is always going to be there. But movements where people feel like they have to be part of them because it is so important, and that's their main motivation, will always fail. Because they will burn out, because they will not build up the persistence necessary. You have to build a movement that's fun, regardless of how dark it is. And you have to embrace that. For me, what that looked like was learning basically how to eat again a lot of the time, because I had so much anxiety that I struggled with eating a lot. And I learned how to cook. And from that, I started to realize, and I swear this is the truth, and it may sound cliche, that I think all change starts with food. Because it is one of the few things that we can agree on, and it's one of the few ways to shut up organizers. And from that, I learned the most important thing for me was building community and taking breaks and realizing that if I need to take 6 months off or a year off or 2 years off, that's okay. Because the movement is just people. If you as an individual are not taking care of yourself, the movement is not taking care of itself. In the truest sense, the most selfish thing you can do is not be selfless. You have to put yourself first. Because if you can't step back at any one time, because everything will collapse, you're not being a good leader, because everything is relying on you. You need to build a model that is not a central dot, you need to build a snowflake. Right? That's what we call it, snowflakes anyways. So, you need to do that and not feel guilty about it. So yes, go out and organize and have fun, but also take a month off after the election. Go and have fun, go on a hike, go somewhere, do literally anything but activism or organizing, because that work is always going to be there. But you need to make sure you are too, through doing those things. Does that make sense? Have fun, that's the bottom line, have community. Because it builds persistence, and from persistence, change comes.
Well, so I'd like to all give our round of applause.
Sustainable monthly donations to help support our staff, because that's the real people that make our work possible. It's not just funding really big, sexy projects. We need the staff that actually make those things possible and help show up in different state legislatures and stuff like that. So please support us. So thank you.
Well, to come forward, save your stories. You can follow what they've got on Twitter and certainly the rest of the social media. But introduce yourself. If you'd like to say hi, you're welcome to do that right now before we get us out. Thank you all, and have a safe evening.